you took the authority post-Cartagena. It looks like before Cartagena, and you've been there since 2010? Is that right?
That's correct.
Like, you didn't just arrive on the block. And you see the conduct that took place in 2006, 2008, the sex parties, the assaults, all of these things that were going on. Cartagena was what, 2 years ago?
2012.
3 years ago. Well, what happened is you set up a culture within the agency that you could get away with this, and you were there. You must have known some of this was going on. Cartagena brought it to the press and our attention, the size and scope of what was going on. The thing that concerns me is before that, some of the people got who were involved. It looks like if you attended a sex party, one report here, one agent was cleared of any wrongdoing. 7 of 10 agents ultimately attended to the parties and engaging with prostitutes. So it looked like the penalty, they got suspensions of a few days, and I think the most was like six days up to that time. So that was sort of the standard operating procedure while you were there until Cartagena. That's the kind of penalty they were getting, right?
If I can explain, Congressman, the first I heard of any of these sex parties or the behavior that's described in the reports was actually Cartagena. When Cartagena happened, I became concerned, is this systemic? Has this happened before? And we went back and we took a look at where this activity had occurred, if anybody had been disciplined for it, and we found one Bogota case.
Well, again, we have instances and we have penalties. Most of them only got minor penalties. And it was known that some of this had been, had posed great security risks. I guess drug folks were paying for some of this activity, and they got anywhere from 4 to 6 days. Only a suspension of 15 days or more is considered serious for adverse employment action. So those people went right on working at that time. So what I'm saying is a culture existed while you were there up to Cartagena, and there were low penalties. After Cartagena, you took some action. Some people were actually fired. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the first case that came.
And the difference, folks, members of the committee, this is the same thing, whether it's Secret Service, VA, IRS, HUD, any agency. She doesn't have the right to summarily fire people. She has to go through a process. Merit System Protection, the protections of Title V, a federal act created by Congress. Unless you change that law and give these people the ability to fire people summarily when they are found in a proper process, at a speedy process, to violate, whether it's sexual assault, sexual harassment, you'll have this continue, all these problems continue across the scope of all of our civil service system. The only one exempt from that, I understand, is FBI. Did get enough time to ask you questions about how many people you fired, but we'll get that in the record at some point, I hope. Yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Lynch, the gentleman from Massachusetts, who's the ranking member of the Subcommittee on National Security. Now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, for allowing me to go in his place. Ms. Lenhart, how do you hold people accountable if you are not able to discipline them?
The system in place, it's a 3-tiered system. There's the inspectors who investigate.
You're not answering my question. How basically, very briefly, because I only have a couple of minutes, how do you hold people accountable when you cannot discipline them when they do, like, okay, so we got 15 to 20 sex parties, 15 to 20. We've got all these allegations. A lot of these agents admitted to prostitution, to soliciting prostitutes, having sex with prostitutes. We don't know their ages because there's been nothing disclosed here. We have them taking weapons. We've got foreign individuals, parts of terrorist groups complicit in this. We've got national security at risk. And you don't have the ability to discipline these people. You know, when I came to this hearing, I thought my problem was that we weren't disciplining these people. I think the problem here, now after hearing you testify, even though you said you were not happy, even though you said you were very disappointed, this is a prostitution ring. 15 to they're using taxpayer money to solicit and pay for prostitutes. And you're very disappointed, you're not happy. I think we're at different levels here. And I find completely vapid the statement that we are not going to let this happen again. We're not doing anything. We're not doing anything. I think the problem now is we're protecting these people. That's what's happening in your agency. You're protecting the people who solicited prostitutes, who had 15 to 20 sex parties, went through this whole operation, used taxpayer money to do it, and I believe compromised the national security. And you're not happy. You know, that's not what I would expect from your department. I really wouldn't. I worked with DEA in Afghanistan, and those folks did a great job. And I think this is a disgrace that their reputation. I see, and they were in some dangerous places in Afghanistan, down in Helmand Province, trying to deal with the opium exportation there, doing heroic work. Those are the DEA agents that I know that worked hard and upheld the dignity of this country and worked with the local families down there, the farmers, just to try to protect them. I'm proud of those DEA agents. They're doing wonderful work on behalf of our country. And this is a blemish. This is just disgraceful that they should be associated with this activity. So I actually feel your system is protecting these people. So there's these 15 to 20 sex parties, and then and by the way, it says here sexual harassment and misconduct. It should be sexual misconduct up front. That's what we're talking about here. This is a very serious issue, and you've done nothing. You've done nothing. How about disclosure? If you can't prosecute them, if you can't bring justice to this situation, why are we stopping the Inspector General from looking at this? Why do the American people why do they not have the names of these individuals?
Well, we did provide the Inspector General with the information so that he could do his review. As far as protecting them, I take great offense to that.
You do. You do. You take offense that someone who runs a 15 to 20 prostitution parties, abusing women, gets a 3-day, 2-day, 1-day. You're offended by that? You're offended by that.
I'm offended by their conduct. I'm offended
I don't see it,
by
though.
the behavior. I am trying to fix a system. I can't fire. I'm trying to fix a system.
How about just naming them? Name and shame. How about that? There was some discipline here. It's laughable. It's laughable, but you did suspend some people here with pay for 1, 2, 3, 10 days. One guy got 10 days. Conduct unbecoming and poor judgment. It just, you know what I think? And I appreciate the gentleman's earlier comments about we've got to give you power. I don't think that's the answer. I think there's a mentality here that needs to be extricated root and branch from the DEA operation. I think we have to have an independent agency that actually goes in, that's not part of the good old boy network, that actually goes in and with sunlight, with disclosure, goes after these people who, like I say, You know, when I think of the DEA agents and the jobs they're doing in Afghanistan, right today, and trying to protect the homeland, you know, this is a disservice to those good agents. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Horwitz, Mr. Lynch really hit on something with respect to the good old boy culture. And this is my concern, that I'm seeing more and more of the good old boy culture as this committee continues its investigation. I mean, we've seen it with the DEA sex parties. We've seen it with some of the things going on in the Secret Service, admittedly not subject to this. We see it in a lot of government agencies. In your investigation, do you get a sense that there is a good old boy mentality is as bad as I think it is?
Well, it's interesting, Congressman, you use those words, because our first review was of the Good Old Boy Roundup events back in the early 90s. We did a report in 1996 about the culture and the need to make it clear about what is permissible and what clearly isn't permissible on and off duty, and yet we're 20 years later and there are still no department-wide policies or training.
Ms. Leonhard, you run the DEA. Do you think it's appropriate in your off time, even in a country where prostitution is illegal, to engage prostitutes?
Absolutely not, and it's against DEA policy.
And how
illegal.
How could any of your agents not know this? This strikes me as just common sense. And we have a memo from Eric Holder, admittedly not a fan of Mr. Holder, but I mean, I can't believe there's even a need for a memo that says it's not appropriate to hire prostitutes. Let me read from the memo, a couple of things from the memo. The solicitation of prostitution threatens the core mission of the department, not simply because it invites extortion, blackmail, and leaks of sensitive or classified information, but because it also undermines the department's effort to eradicate the scourge of human trafficking. Regardless of whether prostitution is legal or tolerated in a particular jurisdiction, soliciting prostitutes creates a greater demand for human trafficking victims, and as a consequence, an increase in the number of minor and adult persons trafficked into commercial sex slavery. And now he goes on, for this reason, I want to reiterate to all department personnel, including attorneys and law enforcement officers, that they're prohibited from soliciting, procuring, or accepting commercial sex. To me, it seems ludicrous that we would even have to write a memo like this. It defies common sense. Mr. Perkins, what about the FBI? Is there anybody in the FBI thinks it's okay to go hire a prostitute?
No, sir. We make it very clear to our employees, both here domestically and overseas.
But the message we're getting with no disciplinary action or time off with pay tends to reinforce that. Mr. Horwitz, is there congressional action that needs to be taken? Do we need to change some of our laws to make it easier to fire people who are proved to have engaged in this?
Well, that's certainly something Congress could look at. As been noted, the FBI has certain authorities that the other three components do not. I will add that one of the things that would help address these is that the OIG, that they get reported as they should to headquarters, that they get reported to the OIG as they should, and that we get copies of records that we need promptly so that we can look at them promptly. That would help as well, and that takes no congressional action because you already have the law in the IG Act that says that should occur, but it's not occurring.
All right, so what do we do to fix that? I mean, somebody's going to have to be disciplined for not reporting it. It's not just the rank and file men and women who are engaged in misconduct that need discipline. It's their superiors that are covering it up and obstructing. Is that not correct?
It's certainly our view that if a employee fails to report to headquarters what the policy requires, which in all law enforcement agencies' cases in the department, that's the policy, that is a violation that should be looked at.
But we're also seeing you want disclosure from the folks that you're investigating. We're starting to see lots of redacted stuff here in Congress when the IG Act only says the identity needs to be needs to be withheld. In fact, had we wanted more information to withheld, we could have modified it on Section 6103 of the taxpayer, of the IRS code. I mean, you want full reporting. What's the excuse for not giving us more access here in Congress? Anybody want to feel that? I mean, some of it's the IG, Mr. Horowitz.
We've certainly put forth on our website publicly and sent to Congress everything that we're allowed to put forth pursuant to the Privacy Act. We have not withheld material.
I think we have a differing interpretation of that, but I see I'm out of time.
The gentleman will yield. Ms. Leonhardt, will you agree to allow the Inspector General to search all 45 terms? You've limited it to 3.
Yes, we don't have the search capabilities that his systems have.
Will you allow him full and unfettered access to review these records?
We would be glad to run that search. We had problems in doing a search of that many names. We found a different way to do it by running offense codes, but Mr. Horowitz and I have a very good working relationship, and if there's something that he wants, he has not hesitated to pick up the phone and talk to me about it, and we'll work it out.
Has she allowed you all the access that you want?
I think the problem has been that, frankly, I've had to call too much. I shouldn't have to make those calls, frankly, to the administrator to get access. The staff, my staff, shouldn't have to spend 4 months going back and forth with the line DEA staff getting redacted versions, being told they can't get things because of privacy issues when that is not a basis for a legal objection, which the DEA and the FBI ultimately conceded. I shouldn't have to be engaging at the highest levels of the FBI and the DEA to get the access that occurred. And let me just say something here about 2 agencies that complied fully. The ATF and the U.S. Marshal Service got us the material immediately. We had no delays. What it took us 4, 5, I don't even know how many months to get from DEA and ATF, we got in a matter of weeks from ATF and the Marshal Service.
Did you mean
fully cooperate?
I think you meant to say DEA and FBI. Correct?
I'm sorry, FBI and DEA compared to ATF and the Marshal Service, who fully cooperated with us.
Thank you very much. I see my time has expired.
Thank you. Now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Leonard, do you think that you're the right person for this job? You know, I just intentionally wanted to hear some of the testimony. I have a lot of concerns. It seems like there's a culture that has developed here, and even the Attorney General's letter, where he has to say, don't fraternize with prostitutes. Hello. Am I missing something? I mean, I think that we are at an all-time low here. Don't you?
As a DEA agent and a female DEA agent for the past 35 years, I'm appalled over this as well. And like the Attorney General had to send a memo reminding people last Friday, I had to send one last year to remind everyone and put everybody on notice.
Okay, I only have a few minutes, but I'm very concerned, Mr. Horowitz, and on page 12 of your report, you made the following statement, and I quote, we found that a regional director, an acting assistant regional director, and a group supervisor failed to report through their chain of command or to DEA OPR repeated allegations of DEA special agents patronizing prostitutes and frequenting a brothel while in an overseas posting, treating these allegations as local management issues. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So despite these facts, none of these employees, the special agent, the group supervisor, the regional director, and the acting assistant regional director ever reported these allegations to the Office of Professional Responsibility or to you at the IG's office. Is that right?
That's correct.
You know, Mr. Morales, when these allegations finally came to light in 2012, your report states, and I quote, the DEA Administrative Counsel, the regional director, for failing to report the allegations. Is that right?
That's correct.
And Ms. Leonard, is that correct? Did you personally counsel the regional director?
The regional director was first counseled by the chief inspector. He was then counseled by the deputy administrator, and then I counseled him as well.
Now, was that the only discipline that he got? Somebody sitting there saying you're supposed to do your job?
Yes, he.
Please. You mean to tell me that was a discipline? Do your job. That's not discipline, is it?
The regional director was not aware of any allegations until it was brought to light a year after an incident.
And, the size and scope of what was going on. The thing that concerns me is before that, some of the people got who were involved. It looks like if you attended a sex party, one report here, one agent was cleared of any wrongdoing. 7 of 10 agents ultimately attended to the parties and engaging with prostitutes. So it looked like the penalty, they got suspensions of a few days, and I think the most was like six days up to that time. So that was sort of the standard operating procedure while you were there until Cartagena. That's the kind of penalty they were getting, right? This VA, IRS, HUD, any agency, she doesn't have the right to summarily fire people. She has to go through a process, Merit System Protection, the protections of Title V, a federal act created by Congress. Unless you change that law and give these people the ability to fire people summarily when they are found in a proper process, at a speedy process, to violate, whether it's sexual assault, sexual harassment, you'll have this continue, all these problems continue across the scope of all of our civil service system. The only one exempt from that, I understand, is FBI. Did get enough time to ask you questions. You took the authority post Cartagena. It looks like before Cartagena, and you've been there since 2010. Is that right?
That's correct.
Like you didn't just arrive on the block. And you see the conduct that took place in 2006, 2008, the sex parties, the assaults, all of these things that were going on. Cartagena was what, 2 years ago?
2012.
3 years ago. Well, what happened is you set up a culture within the agency that you could get away with this, and you were there. You must have known some of this was going on. Cartagena brought it to the press and our attention.
If I can explain, Congressman, the first I heard of any of these sex parties or the behavior that's described in the reports was actually Cartagena. When Cartagena happened, I became concerned, is this systemic? Has this happened before? And we went back and we took a look at where this activity had occurred, if anybody had been disciplined for it, and we found one Bogota case.
Well, again, we have instances and we have penalties. Most of them only got minor penalties, and it was known that some of this had been had posed great security risks. I guess drug folks were paying for some of this activity, and they got anywhere from 4 to 6 days. Only a suspension of 15 days or more is considered serious for adverse employment action. So those people went right on working at that time. So what I'm saying is a culture existed while you were there up to Cartagena, and there were low penalties. After Cartagena, you took some action. Some people were actually fired. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the first case that came.
And the difference, folks, members of the committee, this is the same thing, whether it's Secret Service,